So a good portion of the day we're going to talk about lean UX. And lean UX, lean user experience. It doesn't mean, it's so funny. we were training folks on lean UX with Jeff Godhelf, who teaches who's kind of probably the best known person on lean UX process. And we were doing 2-day workshops all across the globe for our engineers and designers and product folks. And so I had this team, one of my teams in Chennai. They had done this kind of rapid, for PayPal, very rapid, get something out the door. And because they didn't have any design resources, any user experience resources, the guy wrote the email and said, this is so cool, we used lean UX. We didn't have designers, so we used lean UX, which what he meant by that was, you didn't have, you had lean amount of UX, right? So lean UX doesn't mean I don't have a design team or I skip the design team and do it. It's just applying lean principles to the way we build experiences and bring design to life. So breaking down the walls between teams, continuously learning from our users and working in a highly collaborative manner. So at Netflix, I really, really enjoyed my time at Netflix, even when I went through the Quickster days. And at a break, we can talk about Quickster and the split of the DVD and the streaming and the fiasco that happened at Netflix. I lived through that. But we had a really different way of working at Netflix in that we had as few people as possible in our teams. We tried to hire the very best talent. We paid a lot of money, to do that, which we felt like it was worth it. If you have really good people, you don't need as many people, and you don't have as many communication problems. In fact, Reed, our CEO, he would always have, a meetup with everybody who came in the company, and he took small groups of us, and it was always one of the same speeches, and it was, the more process you have, the less talent you have. The more talent goes out the door. And the less talent you have, the more process you need. So you have to really aggressively fight process. And you only use process as a means to an end, not as a thing in itself. And the problem you'll run into in organizations is if you're a person who's given a process, you'll gravitate to those the groups that create process. And then if you're not careful, you'll do local optimization around those processes, and you'll make them, process will become process for process sake. And you'll spot the people in the organization, maybe you're like that, but the first thing they think of is coming up with a process. When a lot of times the root problem is really a social problem or some other kind of social engineering problem. Process, may be something and then a lot of times I end up going to organizations that have no process, and I end up bringing some process in, which is kind of weird because I'm like almost the anti-process person. But you have to have some process. You have to have some to get things done. So Netflix was weird because, it's like we had no employee handbook. There was no employee handbook. Our chief talent officer said, well, there's no rule against coming to work, naked tomorrow, but you probably won't do it because we hire, kind of smart people, and we give you freedom and responsibility. If you really screw up, we give you a severance package and have fun, right? So there was I had no pool for when I went to give increases in salary. I had no limits. I could say this person's worth this much in the market and just give it to them. Is that weird? There was no set vacation policy. You could take as much vacation as you want. There's no accounting for it, no record keeping, nothing, right? Budget, if my developers were complaining one day about, it's hard to test on, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, do you need another laptop? Get 3, I don't care. Whatever it takes to get your job done, you use your head, spend like your own money. And everybody ended up with 2 or 3 monitors and a couple of laptops, but they got their work done and they were more efficient, and there was just no issue around that. Now, Netflix is a really unusual place for that. I'm not, PayPal doesn't operate that way, right? If I never had to have a rec. We just talk and say, well, we need somebody else, okay? I go hire them, right? There was no drama, no process, no anything. And it's been that way for 12 years. So, you know, Netflix was a really interesting place to go, especially going to PayPal now, which has been just the opposite of that. Although again, we're in that transition to change it. We didn't have levels. You know, every company has these levels, right? You're a software engineer, you know? You might have a title of UI engineer or whatever, but, you know, or you're a director, or you're a VP, or you're a C-level. That was it. Nobody worried about directors reporting directors, or, you know, it didn't matter who you reported to. It just got stuff done, right? So Netflix was it was fun. It was a very interesting cultural change for me. Come from Yahoo too. So I got to see that you could actually operate that way, and it was very successful. We also didn't have this culture of a long shelf life. Everything changed all the time, and to me, one of the epiphanies was seeing just how fast things change. You know, rapid experimentation, and getting out live as fast as possible, and failing fast, learning fast, and don't ever overthink it. Because we had enough volume, and some of you may not have this opportunity, some will, like Best Buy has that, for example. You have the volume that you can get out in front of customers, and you can A/B test it, you can do multivariate testing, you can do bucket testing, you know, quantitative kind of ways to do testing. So we definitely had that advantage, and so we could put small micro experiments out all the time, and that's what we were constantly doing. So here was kind of one of the epiphanies for me at Netflix was, in the course of a year. Well, I remember I was shifting us to a new framework, code-wise, because they've been using their own JavaScript library, and I said, well, you know, I just come from Yahoo, and I'd help, you know, with the YUI library, and knew all the YUI guys, and I'd written one of the first, like the carousel component for YUI. And before that, I'd done Rico, so I'd written, you know, Ajax frameworks and JavaScript libraries and stuff like that. So I think most people thought I was probably going to adopt YUI when I went to Netflix. But I looked at it, I was like, you know what? We don't need the components and stuff. I didn't like the baggage of YUI 2.0. I didn't like the way how wordy it was and verbose. So we picked jQuery. You know, jQuery was what we needed, and it did a great job for us. And then we had Java on the back end, and I held my nose and used struts too, because I needed some kind of structure, you know, on the Java JSP side to actually get, you know, some separation on model, view, and controller. But as I was putting this in place, and then started thinking about our A/B testing infrastructure, and you know how our code got so spaghetti-like, you know, with all of our A/B tests and stuff, that at one point I realized that in the course of a year, probably at least 90% or more of our code we throw away. And that was really an unsettling thing on one level, and also a freeing thing on another level. Because, and you can see this, like here, here's just a diagram. If I start off with a test at the very, you know, point of that before it diverges into the A through G, imagine those as 8 different tests that I'm going to do. I'm going to experience on the site, and I'm going to try different variations of maybe, you know, box shots, you know, titles, ratings, and stuff like that. I may change some variations. And there's 8 different tests. Well, over the course of a month or two, whatever it is, C becomes a clear winner. So you take C, and that becomes the experience for the rest of the customers on the site. And then you take C and say, well, we learned some things from that, so let's try some more variations. You try 8 more variations, and then you go to A prime. A wins this time. And A prime not being the same as A, but just some other variations. And if you actually calculate that, that's just that 2 little rounds right there. If you had no sharing between those test cells, which you will, but let's just say perfect, you know, worst condition, no sharing between those test cells, no reuse or anything like that. If you throw all those other test cells away, you throw away 93% of the code that you wrote, right? Now, that's not what I was taught in school. And my computer science classes and my whole experience had been around building reusable components and frameworks and stuff like that, and to focus on long-term maintainability. Now, we still have to do that, and we'll talk more about this a little bit later, but this whole thing of having to throw so much code away really was something that that was very, very unique. And again, we'll talk about that a little more. So Intuit, you know, and Eric's book on Lean Startup, he talks about this. You know, because they had this rhythm of the tax season. You have one initiative, you know, one big initiative, big bang for the, you know, for the tax season. You could see how the product teams would all get aligned around one big release a year, and then of course patches to that for the tax season. And it also with tax and finance, you kind of, you know, get a conservative culture. And what they did was they moved to more lean startup principles, and they started being able to release like 500 different changes in a 2.5-month tax season, and running up to 70 tests a week. And Scott Cook, who's the CEO of Intuit, is also on our board at eBay. You know, really talks about how this movement totally changed the culture at Intuit. It changed their products. It changed their experiences. It changed the value of the company. It changed their profitability. It changed everything. Moving to this lean model.